Just figure it out. We are headed for something. It's pre-planned. It's already on the books. They're rolling out piece by piece their little agenda. They know when it's all going to kick off. They all know. And we're just kind of going along for the ride with our blindfold on, right? So I don't know when. I don't know if it's a week from now or 5 years from now or 15 years from now, but things are going to get really chippy. Man, I love that guitar solo, that Pink Floyd song, Off the Dark Side of the Moon, Time. Just, man, that's good. All right, but that's not what we're talking about here today. I'm going to try to wrap this subject into one video. It's really two things that are very similar, and trying to figure out how to get the point across that I'm trying to make, what's been on my mind. So I'm going to start with, I watched a video today, and it's here, let me pull it up here. Victor Davis Hanson, and the book is The End of Everything. And I look forward to reading this book, and where he goes through 4 civilizations that were destroyed through just typical human warfare process, and I think he's trying to make a point about where we are today in history, and that we better look back and we better see what can happen when these sort of things kick off, because it gets a little bit out of control. And part of what he talks about is, some of these cultures that were destroyed, they felt invincible, and they were like, sure. And I think the first one was the Thebes. Not real familiar with that, but he goes in this video, this hour-long video, he talks about each of the 4 cultures, and it's worth watching. Highly recommend it. But the culture of the Thebes were defeated by Alexander the Great, and he talks about how they felt that they were invincible. And, Alexander the Great comes in, boom, destroys it. The next one is the Romans' defeat of Carthage, and how they got pretty much wiped off the map. And the point is, these cultures are just gone. They're just gone. What do you know about either of those cultures? But you know about the Roman culture. You know about Alexander the Great, right? And then the next one, not quite as erased. Interesting to look into why that would be the case, but it was when the Aztecs were defeated by Cortez and Spain. And that one, he goes into some very interesting detail about sort of what the Aztec culture was doing at the time. And just as a side note, this was a very interesting piece of it that, it's controversial in history, and they're trying to rewrite. I think there are forces that want the Aztec history to have that positive, ooh, look at this great, culture from, Latin America, Mexico, whatever. And so they're whitewashing the part about cannibalism and all of that. So, or not cannibalism, cannibalism, but also child sacrifice, and some other stuff. I think he even mentions ritual sodomy. I mean, he goes into some detail. And Victor Davis Hanson is he's very credible, and he says that they're his sources, and he's cross-referenced enough of them to really feel confident in saying that that those parts of the civilization were real and they happened. And one of the examples that he gives is that the main city was surrounded by water, a lake, and there was they warred the neighboring civilization cities in order to steal the humans to go back and to be able to sacrifice them. They didn't go to war to kill them, they went to war to capture them. And apparently there was this sacrificial situation where they threw like 20 or 30,000 sacrifice bodies into this lake just to dump them off and get rid of them. And there's sort of evidence that happened, historical, actual, physical evidence. And so we went into some other details, but it really looks like that part of their culture was real and did happen. And that was part of the justification that Cortez used, and they were sort of spreading, what was it? Was it Catholicism? No. It was religious. And they felt sort of obligated to, take care of that business. So Aztec culture was basically destroyed, city right down to the foundation, right? And then the last one was the Turks. Actually went through the Turks sacking of Constantinople, which was actually before Cortez, I believe. History was right way, yeah. Like 14-something was the Aztecs, early 1415. And I think Constantinople was before that in the 1300s. Anyway, I should probably check that before I start talking about it. But anyway, sometimes I'll have a rough idea of the subjects I want to talk about, but I don't, and I'll hit bullet points. I'm not really good with prepared material where I sit down and regurgitate 40 minutes. I kind of freewheel it. So sometimes I'll discuss in more detail some of the things, and sometimes I'll miss on certain things completely that I wanted to discuss. It just all depends on how sort of my stream of thought goes. So anyway, so the sacking of Constantinople, they felt invincible. The city was fortified, and gone. And the Byzantine culture that occupied that city, and I think he said for 1,000 years, it was gone. And there's hardly a remnant of it there today. And that's something that, since I probably only knew that part of history, maybe in the last 20 years, and it's like, wait a minute, this city, Istanbul, and you read the history of that territory, and, Mexico wants to take back parts of America. The Native Americans want to take back part of America. Well, maybe there's some of us who want to take back, make Istanbul Constantinople again, okay? Because historically, they were there for a long time. So anyway, but it just shows the nature of warfare. We fight over turf. And you hold that turf until somebody can take it away from you. And that's, all this demonization of American history, of how horrible and brutal we were. It's like, well, yeah, but that's history. Read a history book. Sorry, it sucks for the losing culture, but that is history. And it's great that we've been able to limit some of that, but really, have we? Look at the 20th century. Look at the carnage. Look at the hundreds of millions of people that died just under communism and the few wars, that came as a result of that. So anyway, not to get too far into that, I wanted to bring this up. The End of Everything just released. I am definitely going to take a look at it. Looks like a very interesting read. If you really want to know history, that's, find credible sources and do some reading. I like to watch videos, so the hour that I got from this video probably covered a good chunk of the book. But either way, whether you like to read the book or watch the video, I think it's worthwhile. Okay, so here's what this is leading into. All right, cultures disappear. Warfare is brutal throughout history, and history is written by the victor. We all know that, right? So I want to revisit something that, it's funny. I brought it up probably in one of my first videos, and I've brought it up a couple times since then. And I don't know where this line of thinking has come from, but it seems to be spreading out there. And so I don't know if there's just this collective consciousness thing going on, the 100th monkey effect or whatever. But in the last few years, I don't know how far back it goes, I probably 5-6 years is when I first discovered what topic I'm going to cover here. But it's really, it talks about World War II. And again, you always have to preface this. No, we're not justifying anything Hitler did. No, we're not Nazi. No, we don't want to see anybody like that in power again. Okay, what he did is unspeakable, and he deserved what he got. Well, he deserved more than he got because he probably, slipped away, and who knows, whatever. Believe what you want. But anyway, it was pretty horrible, and the German military and all the people that supported that deserved certainly their fair share of vengeance that was exacted upon them. But what first got this on my radar was when I read the book Hellstorm death of Nazi Germany in 1944 to 1947. And then I started reading a little bit about the culture and the history of what was going on at the time in Germany. And if you've done any of that, it isn't just Hitler just came up out of nowhere and decided he wanted to, go to war with everybody around him. You have to look at the greater picture of what was going on in Europe at that time. And there was a real power shift going on. And it was, the rise of the sort of communist ideology was really taking hold. And think about it. You're a powerful country in Germany. You've suffered a huge defeat in World War I. You're paying reparations that are going to have you indebted forever. You're never going to dig out of. Your country's been annihilated. You're trying to rebuild. And, in 1917, the largest country on the continent at the time, Russia, gets invaded and taken over by, a handful of Bolshevik communists. And that, Bolshevik communist ideology was spreading like wildfire at the time from what I've read. I mean, look at Germany. You had in Frankfurt, you had the Frankfurt School where they were creating all this radical, critical theory with all of the culture rot that we're seeing today because the Frankfurt School, and I've discussed this in other videos, Hitler kicked them out. They came over to New York, to Columbia University, set up shop, and we've been under sort of that influence ever since. That cultural Marxism, their critical theory, they're deconstructing entire Western civilization. The stuff is absolutely a disease. And so, the whole, rise of the anti-fascists, that was, the communist. You can see the pictures of Germany around World War II with the Antifa. That's exactly where that came from. The little Antifas here, that's nothing new. And so there was this huge sort of culture war going on between the communists and pretty much everybody that didn't want to be a communist, right? And so Hitler pretty much hijacked that and obviously took it too far, but he appealed to people's sense of national pride and traditional values in a lot of respects. And so, there was some basis there. And then depending on how much you read and what you want to believe, was he just he was sort of manipulated into all this by the, ruling elite at the time to help keep this sort of strategy of terror and there's a word for it, strategy of tension. The strategy of tension that the globalists have been using for the last 100 and some years. That's why they split the Korea into North Korea and South Korea during the Korean War. We could have won that. The whole peninsula could have been united, but they wanted the strategy of tension. And so they create these opposites. And so they sort of helped the rise of Hitler, and he was the counterbalance to the communists and the Bolsheviks in Russia that were spreading throughout Europe at the time. So again, not saying that what Hitler did obviously wasn't justified, but it also shows too what happens during war is it gets out of control and the worst elements of human nature come out. And that's where I want to go over this book, Hellstorm, because, and I'm going to tie it to what we're experiencing today. Okay, there is a correlation. We're going to repeat history if we don't wake up, if people don't wise up, and I don't know how we get through to the people that are dumbed down. I can't believe it. But the clapping seal idiots will believe anything that they're told as long as it comes from the people that they think are their idols or God or whatever. It's complete insanity. Like the fact that they, the fact that they support what's going on in Ukraine and they don't see that Ukraine has basically been a part of Russia for over 1,000 years, and they can't take the time that it takes to read about the sort of the fascist Nazi side. The Azov Battalion and how much of that is there. I couldn't believe it when I first started researching it. And I didn't believe it back when I first heard about it, when they took control of the government and overthrew an elected government and did all the usual stuff, color revolution, like with Soros money and Obama and stuff they've been doing around the world, for a long time. So that's how stupid people are. And just mind controlled. I don't even want to call it stupid. A lot of them are smart, they're educated, but they're just mind controlled. They believe the propaganda. So what I'm getting at is we're being led down a path that's going to lead to some pretty horrific ends. And like that, like the book, the end of, oh God, the end of everything, right? Victor Davis Hanson's trying to warn us that we're approaching. That's my interpretation. And he's tactful about it because he doesn't want to come out, and just say it. And we're approaching that. We're approaching the end of everything moment. And he's trying to help wake people up to it. So what I wanted to do is I'm going to talk a little bit about this book, Hellstorm. And it's what happened at the end of World War II as written from the German perspective. And this goes back to with the annihilation of those cultures. History is written by the victors. So the history that you know of what happened in World War II at the end, it is what it is. That's what we learned in school. That's, Germans bad, Americans good. But if you really think about it, this is the stuff that's get normalized. So when you stop and think about it, you go, wait a minute, that we did what? And I'm not saying we should have sided with Hitler. We obviously shouldn't, given what he was doing. But we sided with the communists. Think about that. Stalin killed tens of millions of people. It's just a bloody terror. It was everything that if you know anything about communism, it was everything that you know that it is. But we sided with that. What the hell were we thinking? And I'm not saying we should side with Hitler. But it just doesn't make any sense that we picked that side. And we helped Stalin, invade more territory, right? Now, Hitler needed to be deposed. That machine needed to be dismantled. But when you think about it, it makes interesting bedfellows, right? So I'm just going, So, America, England, we wrote the history. I'm going to read a couple excerpts from this book, and it's what we did at the end of the war. And it's nothing to be proud of, folks. It just isn't. And, war is hell. You look back through history, and it's even in the Bible, it's just vicious, where to really dominate and to take over territory, they go in and they kill everybody. We're sort of past that, humanity is, but are we? Because I see some of that in our future if we're not careful. And there was some of that at the end of World War II. There was some of that with what Stalin did. In Ukraine, what do they call them? The kulaks, the farmers. They starved 5-6 million people. Took all their food, to sell it on the market and, fund whatever war machine or whatever he was building. Not to mention all the, people that he sent off to the gulags. He killed 10, 20, 30 million people. Just ridiculous. Look what Mao did, to his own people. He brainwashed the younger generations to hate, their parents and to see them as, the people that were the problem, they're in the way. And, read some of that history. Oh God, what was it? Was it a movie? It was something. There's a book or movie that came out recently that showed some of that, where they would take a parent that had been perceived as breaking one of the Maoist rules and bring them up onto a stage, and they'd be publicly shamed, and the kids would sometimes kill them. This is history, and you can brainwash people and mind control them enough to kill their own parents. This has happened, and I'm just going to keep saying it. We're heading toward that. So it's not like we're innocent and that we've escaped this part of the worst part of humanity. Some of that has still happened. It's still going on. I posted, this video right here. These are all slave children, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old in Africa being sold off. And yet, the propaganda tells you that only white people have ever owned slaves in America, and we're the most evil thing on the earth. We're being set up to be just annihilated. Yet it's happening today still in Africa. When the boats landed in Africa way back in the day when slavery was legal, they didn't go into the villages and terrorize. The village overlords, whatever, brought the slaves to the ships. Okay? So who's guilty? Who has blood on their hands? Everybody. All right. So anyway, let's jump into this Hellstorm, and just it's really about the terror. So I just kind of like to drill down into some of the weeds instead of just give you an overall synopsis. And the point is, yes, Germany needed to pay a price, but there were a lot of women and children, and probably even some men, that wanted nothing to do with what Hitler was doing. And I equate it today with what our government's doing in Ukraine. I want nothing to do with it. I want absolutely nothing to do with our despicable, filthy, rotten, lying, evil, hijacked government. We're being run by psychopaths. They've taken over this country. They're wreaking havoc around the world in the name of America, using American money and power. And they're doing it in our name for a reason, to ruin the reputation of what America is and what Americans are, to get to the point where we will become what they're going to do to us, what we did at the end of World War II and what other victorious invading armies have done. And it's just a bloody slaughter of everything and everyone, okay? We're being set up as the bad guys. If you don't see that, you're not paying attention. We're being set up as the bad guys in the eyes of everybody around the world. Look at the corporate greed going into countries for the last 100 years since, the oil boom. I mean, this goes way back. And, extracting, resources, not helping build up those local cultures and economies, just robbing, stealing, and looting. That's not capitalism. Well, it is. I mean, it's monopoly capitalism. It's, I'm sure there's another word for it. Bloody capitalism, call it whatever you want. But that's what the robber barons have been doing in the name of American business, American empire for a long time. We fought wars in South America over sugar. We've overthrown governments just to protect the sugar industry. And I forget the guy's name, but the sugar? Yeah, sugar or bananas, one of the two, and I forget the country. But they eventually propped him up, got him in power, overthrew the government, so that Dole? I don't know. Anyway, there's too much in here, folks, and I can't keep track of it all. So anyway, it's easy to research yourself, and it's just one of many countries that we overthrew for monopoly capitalist interests. And it wasn't about creating democracy like I always thought it was, growing up. It had nothing to do with democracy. They don't care. They want peasants. They always have. And so that's what we've been installing around the world. Tin pot dictators, so we could extract resources, build wealth, and make the tin pot dictator very, very wealthy while his people suffer and starve. And so the rest of the world, by the time they're done, is going to hate us like nothing you've ever seen. They already do in a lot of places. And if they ever get their hands on us, it's going to be ugly. All right? So that's the point. I see the parallels. I see the parallels building. I see the propaganda. I see people buying it. And you start connecting the dots. That's where they're taking us. So I'm just trying to put the word out as best I can. I'm sure I'm not the only one that recognizes this. So let's read a little bit of this so you can get an idea kind of what we may be in for if we don't wise up. Okay, this is what happened and was going. And this is just a tidbit. Read this whole book. Ruthless, especially. The Americans were guilty too. God bless all of our World War II veterans, but some of them did some bad shit. Okay, warfare is ugly, and there are accounts of what the Russians did because they hated Hitler and the Germans especially because they got kicked out of their country. And they were pissed off communists. And they went in there raping, murdering, pillaging. And you read some of the firsthand accounts, and it's sickening and despicable. Okay? That's what happens when you get conquered. And so we better wake up because we're headed down this path. All right, so let's read a little bit. So this is mostly talks about the bombing that we did after. And when I watched, so there is also a video of this, Hellstorm, the audiobook by Thomas Goodrich. I think there's one that's about an hour long. Might have been this one that I watched. And really good. Highly recommend it because it goes into some of the detail and there's some good images and video around that time. So it's definitely worth watching. The book itself is a good read if you really want to get a feel. But it's written by, it's their version of what happened. And here's the thing. Is it all true? I don't know. I mean, at one point it comes in here and talks about, and I'll get to it, you'll see that, he says, well, they talk about the bombing and how the Allied forces just started bombing. And that's what most of this is about, just brutal. And here it says, well, and then at some point the Germans started bombing back. Well, my understanding of that, the terror bombing, was always that Hitler bombed the civilian populations of England first. Well, if you read this, it's saying that England bombed the Germans first. So who do you believe? I don't know. But take in both sides. Decide what you believe. That's it. To say that, I can't read this is, they're just horrible people. They all deserve to die. That's some really sick thinking, if you think that. Okay? Because when that mentality comes to America, that's what's going to happen to you and me. And there are innocent people involved. And even though history says you kill them all, we created rules that nobody's following, but the rules are there. Geneva Conventions, right? And anybody that is okay with murdering innocent women and children, I don't know, man. To me, that's a line that, there's going to be collateral damage in warfare, especially like you look at the terrorists, Hamas, building their bases underneath hospitals. I mean, that sucks. And it's unfortunate, and that means there's going to be some collateral damage. But you don't go out of your way and seek out those civilians to destroy just because they're fill in the blank, German, whatever other nationality or race or color. You don't do it. But that's what happens throughout history, so let's read a little bit of this. Okay, it's going to cover the highlighted stuff here for the most part. On September 15th, 1944, President Franklin Roosevelt made the demand for extermination official when he endorsed the so-called Morgenthau Plan. We'll talk about that a little bit. That was the original plan of post-war Germany, and it was basically a ruthless annihilation of most of the population of Germany. I mean, it's just outright genocide, just absolute scorched earth, starvation, death. And then if you read the American version of history, we did not implement the Morgenthau Plan. You read this version, we kind of did. So again, decide what you want to believe. The program called for the complete destruction of Germany after victory had been won. In addition, let me read a little bit more of this. In addition to the dismantling or destruction of German industry and the permanent closure of mines, the Morgenthau Plan called for a reduction of the Reich's land area by 1/2. So we're going to shrink it down, which, that's victor. We're the victor. We can take it all. We can turn it all into an American state, the United States of America in Germany, if we wanted to. We won. To the victor go the spoils. So, there's only so much that they can complain about when it comes to stuff like that. So, this is warfare. As many calculated, and as Roosevelt, General George C. Marshall, and other proponents of the plan well knew, this act guaranteed that roughly 2/3 of the German population, or 50 million people, would soon die of starvation. So, are you okay with that? Most of these people are innocent, and some of them, I'm sure, didn't want any part of what Hitler was doing, just as I don't want any part of what my government is currently doing. The fucking Democrats, they're the party of war. They're outright communists. We have no business being in Ukraine. None. It's despicable. But they start war for the sake of war. They want the war to start a greater war, and they're going to do whatever they have to do to get it, but in the name of America. And I'm not on board. That doesn't mean I'm joining up with the other side or whatever. I'm not. I'm for no war. Get the hell out of Ukraine. We have no business being there. Stop spending my money. Stop sending American people over there, soldiers, they're there, whether you think they are or not. Just stop it. But they won't. They're not going to stop. All right, so back to this. They have asked for it, snapped Morgenthau. When someone expressed shock at the plan, why the hell should I worry about what happens to their people? See, I mean, it's just vicious. When you depersonalize someone, it's easy to call for the slaughter of innocent people. Why should I care? All right, the following day, as rescue crews and firefighters from throughout northern Germany battled the... Wait a minute, what did I miss? Oh, yeah, okay. So now we get into some of... Okay, now we're up to page 14. This is after the bombing started. The following day, as rescue crews and firefighters from throughout northern Germany battled the blaze, bombers of the U.S. Army Air Force appeared over Hamburg. As planned, the Americans surprised not only the emergency workers, but columns of fleeing refugees as well. During the ensuing massacre, thousands perished. Okay, and if you watch the video, this is, in Hamburg, they thought they were safe because there were really, I believe it says there were no military operations going on there, no factories, whatnot. It was a high culture area, and they thought they were going to be okay. And then one night, I think Brits came in and just lit it up, and just all night, just bombing, and it was just absolute terror of the civilians, okay? And this is saying the following day, the people are trying to dig themselves out, those that survived and climb out to this wreckage and the horror. All of a sudden, in the middle of the day, now here comes the Americans, and they commence with their bombing, so it's not over yet. The next night, RAF bombers returned, in addition to the normal payload of high explosives, and this is, they know they're bombing innocent civilians. They know this is not military people. This is a direct assault on civilians to inflict casualties, okay? Women, children, you name it. In addition to the normal payload of high explosives, the British sent down tons of phosphorus bombs to accelerate the fires. If you know what phosphorus is, I mean, it's nasty stuff. It just flames, just gets on your skin, lights you on fire, and just burns through you. It's just absolutely brutal. All right, the resulting conflagration ignited a firestorm. So imagine phosphorus, bombs, just all getting rained down. This is just hurricane-force winds created by the intense heat and subsequent updraft, uprooted trees, ripped roofs from buildings, and sucked screaming victims back into the inferno. It's just visual. It's just hard to imagine. Such a visual, just created by fire. Just horrific. Some who escaped the 150-mile-per-hour winds in the streets became mired in melting asphalt and quickly burst into flames. And again, this is just whoever it's happening to. If you're a woman or a child, I can't wrap my head around this, but this is what human beings are capable of. So, all right, those burst into flames. Those who threw themselves into the city's canals died of thermal radiation to the lungs. Then, as they floated on the water surface, they too ignited. In the center of the Holocaust, temperatures reached 1,500 degrees, and when the great mass of flames joined, they rose to a height of 3 miles. The hellish drama below was not lost on those above. I mean, just picture it. Just picture it. So I think we've been desensitized with all the movies, all the action movies and, video games and all that. We've been kind of desensitized to this stuff. But if you picture 3 miles of flames and a, 2 by 3 or whatever square mile just lit up, like an inferno, and people just getting just blasted, in the middle of it all. All right. The attacks against Hamburg continued unabated for another week. Wow. Finally, there was nothing left to destroy. Aptly dubbed by the Allies Operation Gomorrah, the raids have been a cold and calculated attempt to scorch Hamburg and its people from the face of the earth. The plan succeeded with 13 square miles of total destruction, with 750,000 homeless, with an estimated 60,000 to 100,000 dead, mostly women and children. Hamburg, for all intents and purposes, had ceased to exist. For those who had harbored hopes that the British and American war against Germany would be waged in a humane, manner and directed solely at the fighting forces, the events of Hamburg was final and powerful proof that indeed it would not. It was now clear to all that the Allied war had become a war of massacre and unmasked terror. The obliteration of Hamburg was only the most graphic and egregious example of a pattern that had been building since 1940. Unlike the Battle of Britain, which was a military contest from first to last, it was Harris's belief that the intense, sustained airstrikes against German population centers could prove decisive. Churchill initially vacillated between striking at purely military targets and aiming at the man in the street. "My dear sir," protested the Prime Minister to an advocate of indiscriminate bombing during the height of the Battle of Britain, "this is a military and not a civilian war. You and others may desire to kill women and children. We desire to destroy German military objectives," which he obviously changed his mind. As with the Morgenthau Plan, however, the mercurial Churchill soon reversed himself and gave Harris and his scheme the go-ahead. 4 months following the onset of the British bombing campaign, okay, here's the part where, I don't know what's true. The German Luftwaffe finally retaliated with raids of its own, notably the ancient English city of Coventry, where nearly 400 civilians were killed. So, the German side is making it sound like, it was retaliation that they bombed and only 400 died, whereas tens of thousands were just eviscerated in indiscriminate bombings for weeks and months on end. I don't know which is true, right? As a consequence, swarms of British bombers began the systematic destruction of Germany. German cities will be subjected to an ordeal the like of which has never been experienced by a country in continuity, severity, and magnitude, vowed Churchill. To achieve this end, there are no lengths of violence to which we will not go. So once he changed his mind, he really got into it. All right. Publicly, Ira Eaker, commander of the U.S. 8th Air Force, expressed horror and contempt at the indiscriminate British bombing raids, usually carried out under cover of darkness. Although the risk to his own crews were infinitely greater, the American general opted for daylight precision bombing, where the targets would be military and industrial installations alone. This course, most agreed, was the more manly and civilized approach. We should never allow the history of this war to convict us of throwing the strategic bomber at the man in the street, Eaker announced. Well, they did. Unfortunately, and despite such promising pronouncements, the Americans did not hesitate when occasions arose to pitch in and join their British comrades for raids on residential areas, as the survivors of Hamburg could sadly attest. Let's see, restricted bomb, Germany, pretty saturation. Although Churchill, Arthur Harris, and RAF communiques continuously referred to their air campaign against Germany as area, carpet, saturation, or unrestricted bombing, the old, the young, and the weak who were forced to endure the nightmare and who made up the overwhelming majority of its victims called it by a simpler, more accurate name, terror bombing. So, this really just, it scratches the surface of what's in this book. And by the time you're done reading it, you really get a visceral feel of what happened in Germany from the German side once the Allied forces, and especially the communists, broke through and entered into the civilian populations. Some of it was pretty horrific, as you can see. And that's just the terror bombings. Like I said, especially the communists, they just were ruthless, absolutely ruthless, if you read this book. And again, we could write a book about what the Germans did, or there probably are books, when they invaded these other countries. And I'm not saying one side is right or wrong. I'm just saying in this mess, a lot of innocent people that didn't deserve to die were annihilated. And that's the part where, I do have compassion in that respect. Okay, so there's a little bit about the Morgenthau Plan. So the Morgenthau Plan to destroy warmongering Germany was never adopted, that's what they say, unpacking the lies justifying murdering 9 million Germans after World War II. Okay, so 9 million is a conservative estimate, a minimum of 1.5 million German POWs, and I've read maybe it's in the video, Hellstrom video, where it goes into some great detail about how we treated some of the POWs. And again, these were soldiers. So, you show no mercy, but then you turn around and you read accounts of like, the Bataan Death March that Japan inflicted. Was Japan inflicted on American soldiers during World War II, right? And you get outraged and how dare you, these were soldiers, they were captured, they were POWs, rah, rah, rah. Well, here we go. We were doing it too. So, nobody's innocent in this. And so don't think that our military, and our leaders especially, they're absolute psychopaths. They fly airplanes into buildings and kill innocent people. So that's in broad daylight, just as an excuse to invade countries, go to war, and continue their agenda. Under the cover of warfare, think of what they're willing to do to humanity. So that's why nuclear annihilation is a very real possibility. It's on the table right now. So 9 million is a conservative estimate, minimum of 1.5 million German POWs, 2.1 million German expellees, and 5.7 million German residents needlessly died after the war. This is far more Germans than died during the Second World War. Millions of these Germans slowly starved to death while the Allies withheld available food. The majority of these post-war dead Germans were women, children, and very old men. And that's just reality. No better than the communists. No better than Stalin, folks. It sucks. That's what we did. And you don't want, nobody wants to talk about that because we want to, glorify our victory. And I get it. Just like, back to the Aztecs, we're trying to normalize this culture as a great civilization. Well, yeah, except for the, child sacrifice and all the other crap that, societies do when they begin decaying, as we're beginning to do, right? I mean, abortion is child sacrifice. Our Satan-worshiping pedophile overlords have set the conditions to please their satanic god in ways that people don't even realize, okay? Abortion is child sacrifice to them. So, take it or leave it. Believe it or not. I don't care. All right, so let's talk about this little document here. JCS 1067, a handbook for military government in Germany, was ready in August 1944. It advocated a quick, restoration of normal life for the German people and reconstruction of Germany. Henry Morgenthau Jr. brought it to the attention of President Franklin D. Roosevelt, who, after reading it, rejected it with the words, "Too many people here and in England hold the view that the German people as a whole are not responsible for what has taken place, that only a few Nazis are responsible." So they're trying, it's like, hey, let's try to, cooler heads prevail. Well, let's not just throw everybody in the same pot as a bunch of evil villains. And that, unfortunately, is not based in fact. The German people must have it driven home to them that the whole nation has been engaged in a lawless conspiracy against the decencies of modern civilization. The whole nation, everybody, all right? That's our president, Franklin Roosevelt, said that. And this last part, the whole nation has been engaged in a lawless conspiracy against the decencies of modern civilization. How would you describe what we're witnessing today? The release of COVID, 9/11. There is a modern conspiracy against the decencies of modern civilization. This is the parallel. And if we're not careful, they're going to be saying that about us. And that's why I see the correlation. We're just mapping right onto it. And that's why I brought up the Victor Davis Hanson book. It just, read history. Learn history, folks. We're just barreling down the path. All right. A new document was drafted, the Joint Chiefs of Staff Directive 1067. Here the U.S. military government of occupation in Germany was ordered to take no steps looking toward the economic rehabilitation of Germany or designed to maintain or strengthen the German economy, and it was also ordered that starvation, disease, and civil unrest were to be kept below such levels where they would pose a danger to the troops of occupation. And so, and I haven't read anything on this, but, think about, we occupied Japan for quite a while too. And at least my understanding of history is we were there to sort of restore order and civility and kind of help rebuild, right? Who knows? Maybe there's a Japanese book like this. But, all right. The directive was formally issued to Eisenhower in the spring of 1945 and it applied only to the U.S. zone, although attempts had been made to get the other allies to accept it. The occupation directive remained secret until October 17, 1945. It was made known to the public 2 months after the U.S. had succeeded in incorporating much of it into the Potsdam Agreement. So that's what succeeded the Morgenthau Plan that they said wasn't adopted, when elements of it sounds like most certainly were. And if you read some of the accounts of what happened, then that's what we did. On March 20th, 1945, President Roosevelt was warned that the JCS 1067 was not workable. It would let Germany stew in their own juice. It would let the Germans stew in their own juice. Roosevelt's response was, let them have soup kitchens, let their economies sink. Asked if he wanted the German people to starve, he replied, why not? Not old Roosevelt. Well, he was a little secret, little commie himself, so that's just my opinion. It's probably written somewhere, I just haven't read it. But I mean, the New Deal, I mean, the whole left, I mean, they've been commies for 100 and whatever years. It's really undeniable at this point when you look at what they stand for. On May 10th, 1945, Truman signed the JCS 1067, ignoring the amendments to JCS 1067 that had been inserted by McCloy of the War Department. Morgenthau told his staff that it was a big day for the Treasury and that he hoped that someone doesn't recognize it as the Morgenthau Plan. So there you go. It's admitted in their own words that they did in fact implement the Morgenthau Plan. And if you want, just Google it. If you want to read more about the Morgenthau Plan, it's all there. I've read it. Several years ago. I think I did this whole deep dive research when I came across Hellstorm and another website, and just thought, man, you never really think about the other side of things. We all just know, and we've heard the saying, history is written by the victor. But do you ever try to, put it into balanced perspective and look at the other side? And I think in World War II, it's worth taking a look, because there's a lot of bad that went on here that we don't want to repeat. And that's my point of going through all of this. It's relevant because it's happening. We're laying the groundwork today for this sort of outcome, or the sort of outcome that Victor Davis Hanson writes about, with these other civilizations where they just get annihilated like they never existed. If we're not careful, America is going to get annihilated and the victors will write us out of history. I mean, they're trying to write all of Western civilization out of history if you really pay attention to what they're doing. I mean, this is the most anti-white, anti-Western civilization agenda. If you can't see it, I don't know what else to say. And this sort of demonization and all the actions that are being taken to stir up these race wars and these civil conflicts, that's where it all ends. Just watch commercials, watch TV programming. Not a lot of white people in there. We're being written out of history, real time. You're seeing it. So, are we willing to? I don't know what that looks like, but I don't want that to happen. But our overlords are setting the conditions for it to happen. They've sold us out, and that's where we're headed. So I go back to the statement right here. Instead of saying the German people, the American people, or the Anglo or the Western people must have it driven home to them that the whole nation has been engaged in a lawless conspiracy against the decencies of modern civilization. That's what our enemies are thinking. China, Russia, Iran, and whoever else they can rally. And if we do enough damage, continue to do enough damage around the world as we've been doing. That's how that looks. And it's just, I don't know how this plays out. None of us do, but there is a plan in place. The people that ran all this, those groups are still, they're running it now. And like I said, they've got a plan. When you see, step by step, starting the wars, all of these dominoes are part of the same plan, the same agenda. They lead to an inevitable cataclysm that's going to be horrific. And right now, we're like those people in, whether it's Constantinople or Carthage, we're American, you can't beat us. There's a gun behind every blade of grass, Okay, yeah, but the power structure that is forming around us to destroy us is absolutely overwhelming, because it's backed by all of the technology, all of the wealth, and all of the advanced technology of this globalist cabal that's hijacked our country and hijacked all of that. And they're building robot armies, they're building germ warfare, they're building all sorts of things, all sorts of ways to kill us. And like I've said in other videos, we are literally in a kill box right now. They could light us up at any time and just kill a whole lot of people. But they have a plan, how they're going to do it, and we're going to see. We're going to see how it plays out, and hopefully we can. To be honest with you, I don't think we can stop it. But I keep saying that. Well, hopefully we can stop it, or hopefully we can make enough people up, or hopefully we can, blah blah blah. God will intervene. And like I said, I'm black-pilled. They've said. They wrote it, if you believe, my video on pawns in the game, where one of their points, I think it was point number 6, the plan must remain absolutely secret until the moment at which we have enough power that they can't do anything about it. Well, we're at that moment. We've been at that moment. They're telling us everything because that's how they do it. And they're telling us because they believe they have enough power to win. And when I look at what they have, the technology and just all of it, yeah, they do. They have the power to burn it all down. And so you better prepare for that. That's all I'm saying. I am absolutely black-pilled. And I just see too many approaching conditions that just patriotic Americans with our firearms is not going to be enough to beat it back. And the people that launch all this, they can hide in their bunkers. But once this all kicks off, it at some point will go nuclear, and and then it's lights out, right? I mean, some of us might live, I don't know, but and what we are going to witness before that is going to be pretty horrific. It's going to be hand to hand combat in the streets of America. You're going to see it. Now again, I say this all the time, and I know it sounds just crazy, and it's just out there, but I'll say, I hope I'm wrong. But man, I study this stuff, and this is the direction it's headed. Now, conditions may change, and my position may change as a result. Just as in warfare, you're constantly changing tactics, and your strategy, adjusts based on, boots on the ground, real-time conditions today, not the plan you came up with yesterday. So right now, today, I don't see an effective response to this power structure that's orchestrating all of these events. They're going to lead to thermonuclear Armageddon. I don't see it. It may be growing. It may be there. It may be building. Sorry, it's not Q. It's not. At least I believe it's not. And again, hope I'm wrong. But that's how it looks. And I'm just trying to bring as much of this to as many people as I can. Hope you get something out of it. And, we just keep putting it out there. We're in a battle for hearts and minds, as I've said before. And if we can wake enough people up, yeah, maybe we can get out of this. I mean, there's always hope. I'll never, I'm black-pilled, but I'll never lose all hope. And all of what God's intervention could do, and just, there's always a chance. So it's not like I'm just sitting there waiting to see the mushroom cloud. I'm fighting every day, and I'll do everything I can. And I know that all of you out there are probably doing the same. So it's not like I'm just sitting here and just know it's all. But it looks pretty bleak to me right now, and that could change tomorrow. So let's hope it does. All right. So let's keep putting it out there. Let's change this. Let's turn this thing around. We can do it. We can do it. It can be done. I'm just saying right now it doesn't look very good. All right. So, all right. Thanks. Hope you got something out of this. I'll talk to you later.